The Elite Aerosports RAYZR is wrapping up in this video, video number 3 in the build series. We've got a lot to accomplish, a lot of the finer details in this video. So engine install, plumbing, setup of the surfaces and control surfaces, center of gravity check and setup, lots to do. So let's dive back into this outstanding aircraft. All right, so just opening up the fuselage to look at the engine install. Now this is a really small thing, but it's pretty significant. So when you go to pull this canopy off, you don't actually need to pull the bolt all the way out. You can leave it threaded in, and this is a nice little thing. Any canopy that has the bolt that has to come out, it's a little bit sketchy because you got to put it in your pocket so you don't lose it, or thread it back into the plane. This one, you don't need to. So front hatch comes off and exposes all of the front area, and then for the back hatch there's this thumb screw right here. Now, of course, we covered this in the unboxing video, but there is the engine hatch. Okay, so previously we finished off mounting our little extensions for our turbine rails. So that was 24 hours ago, and now they are all solid. So you can see there, we didn't add very much, about 5 millimeters onto the rail. Now that engine should fit perfectly in there. All right, so we're gonna take our, before we put the engine in there, we're gonna take our little wood plane here and just get rid of the little ridge of high sol there. So it's not very much, but just enough to make a little ridge. That side's pretty good, but we'll do that side anyways. It's mainly right there. There we go, now we're ready for the engine. All right, so we got the Zykoy 240. Hopefully these rail extensions aren't too wide. Nope, perfect. I was actually worried that they might be a little bit too wide because you have your little tabs and stuff here, but I think that's gonna be just perfection. Kind of centered on our marks previously, so about there. That just sets our distance inside the bell mouth. Let's take a look inside the tailpipe. All right, and a shot in the tailpipe, and it is perfection. That's awesome. So we will get that turbine fastened down next. So we're going to drill our holes here first, and then I'm going to pull the turbine out. We're going to vacuum up all the dust, and then we're just going to paint our little rail extensions black, and we'll also use a little bit of rubbing alcohol and get rid of our paint marker that we had on there previously. You can see here that the either the engine rail or the actual bracket on the engine is not quite flat. So not a big deal. Once we screw that down, it'll even everything out. So, all right, so we've got our rails painted, we've got them drilled. It's hard to see the drill marks, but that is ready to go. So while we're waiting for that paint to dry, I'm gonna get the wings installed on the aircraft. Now the other thing I did was I flipped the bracket around on the turbine. So the reason for that is the little tabs there, because we put our extensions on, they were kind of hitting the tabs. So in order to get a perfect fit, we flipped the bracket around, rotated it 180 degrees. So now if you look on the underside, you'll see that the bracket's gonna sit flush because there's nothing on there to interfere. So anyways, we're waiting to install the turbine. So let's get the wings on the aircraft. All right, wings are installed for the first time, completed. We obviously put them on when we were unboxing it, but there we go, that looks wicked. The bolts aren't done up yet, but we'll get those installed. So the bolts are done through the gear openings. So you would put your wings on, drop your landing gear, and then put your bolts in from the underside. The wing bolts, I don't know if I mentioned this before, but I high-soled them to the washers, or high-soled the washers to the wing bolts. So those are all one piece. So we're going to get our battery setup done here. So this is still sitting loose in the aircraft like that. So we're going to get our battery tray installed. We'll get that screwed down, and then we will get our batteries in the nose so we can do our programming. All right, so we've got wings bolted on, we've got turbine installed, we've got batteries installed and plugged in the nose, and we're ready to turn our receiver system on. and start working on the programming. So the first thing I'll do is I'll get the flaps set up. Now if you remember, our mechanical lock on full flaps is what it is. So if we go to full flaps, they should be even. The adjustments for takeoff flaps and flaps off are all done in the radio. So that's the first thing we'll take a look at, just so we can get the flaps dealt with. All right, so now what we're going to do is we're going to go to flaps off. Now I've already adjusted this, but I forgot to turn the camera on. So we've got each flap adjusted, so it's just a little bit loose on flaps off. And the flaps are using a 9930 servo, which is a non-brushless servo. That's why you hear them buzzing. So if we had a 599 servo in the flaps, you wouldn't hear any buzzing. Now I don't mind the buzzing because that means that you're getting feedback from the servos. So now that these are paired, S1 is our left servo, S2 is our right servo, we can adjust these things together and get the same kind of response. So that's that. I will do takeoff flaps next. And takeoff flaps, we need to look at the manual numbers and see where we need to be at. And according to the website, flaps full, that's fine. We need to mix in our down elevator. We'll do that after. Takeoff flaps, 25 millimeters from aileron. So that measurement's going to be right here. So what I'll do is I'll take that measurement and adjust each flap independently, and then I will visually confirm that both of those flaps are equal. Now how we do that, if we go to full flaps, for example, and we put our head in the center of the aircraft. I'm trying to show you guys this on the camera. Now if you look at the profile of the flaps, as you move your head away, those flaps should be absolutely identical on the profile. So our full flaps mechanically are the same, angle-wise they're the same. So when we go to flaps off, of course that's kind of fixed because they come to a stop. But takeoff flaps, we're going to do our measurement, and then once that's done, we're also going to give it a visual as well. So because this program came from the BDX, you can see that we've got some flap mix built in for flaps. So we're going to get that adjusted next. Our elevators are very neutral, which is good. So what we'll do is we'll go to takeoff flaps. We're going to go to our flight mode trim. So that's fine tuning, flight mode trim. You can see there we've got 0 flight mode trim added, 0 and 31%. So we're going to adjust that and we will measure that out. So we're supposed to have 3 to 4 millimeters of down. So it's a little bit too much still. So we're just going center to center. So that is 4 millimeters right there. I'm going to go just a couple clicks more. There we go. So about 4.5 millimeters of elevator compensation. So because we are using flight modes, what happens is when you're in regular flying mode, let's say we're flying here in regular flying mode and we add a bunch of forward elevator trim. Let's say we go up and we need to add a 14 points, 15 points of forward elevator trim, and then we go to takeoff flaps. You can see we've got different trims in each flight mode. So what that means is when we trim out our takeoff flaps and full flaps, it's going to be separate and we can trim that out independently on the radio. So that makes setup so much easier. So that first flight, basically what you're doing is you're taking the airplane up and you can go to regular flying mode, trim it out, go to gear down, landing flaps, trim that out, then go to full flaps, trim that out. Your plane's good to go, trimmed in all different flight modes, which is the right way to do things. All right, so now we're going to adjust our surfaces. We'll start off with the rudder because that one's simple, and we're basically getting the most amount of travel we can get. So we need to reduce that a little bit. You can see there we are going to hit our opening. So we'll reduce that a little bit. I don't know what the number is supposed to be. So we'll go into, we can do this a couple ways. I like to keep the rudder dual rates fairly high because our nose wheel mix is based on this. So if we go to our actual servo for the rudder, so model, servo setup, we're going to go to our rudder servo, which is there. So it's already centered basically. We've got that done from our setup. And we're pretty close. We're going to add a little bit of sub trim here. There we go. Kind of have to split the difference because if we're centered up here, we're a little off kilter there. So we'll just kind of split the difference, so that's fine. And then now we're going to adjust our max positive, and we're going to drop that down so we're not interfering with anything. So we'll go 80% to begin with. We'll see how that works. Better, that's lots of throw, and we're not interfering with anything. So we'll keep that there. The actual travel that we're getting here from the base, so we're getting 70 millimeters of travel, a little bit more in that direction. So yeah, we're getting 70 millimeters of travel on the rudder. And just for reference, the manual numbers on the rudder are saying 75 millimeters plus. So we're basically maxing that out, and we're getting what we need to get. So now we'll check our elevators. All right, now the website for the elevators says that we should be getting 10 to 15 millimeters low rates to high rates on the elevators. So, and that's at the tip. So right now we're getting lots of movement. About 20 millimeters. We want 10 to 15. So we're going to go into our, I'm going to check the dual rate menu first. All right, so our dual rate menu, we are 55% on elevators. So I don't want to have that dual rate menu dropped too much. So I'm going to go in and I'm going to adjust our servos themselves. So our servo setup, we're going to go into our elevator. We've got elevator 1 and 2. So we're just going to take these elevators and we're going to reduce the travel down to 80%. And we're going to reduce our max to 100. Now the max, you got to remember, is everything involved with the servo. So in this case, we've got flight mode trim plus our travel available on the surface. So we're going to keep that there, 80 and 100, and then we're going to go to our next one. We're going to drop that to 80 and 100. And then now if we need more travel than that, which I don't think we will, if we need more travel than that, we could add it back in the dual rate menu. So now we'll measure this again from the tip. So that is, we're at about 15 millimeters of travel. And again, we're supposed to have 10 to 15. Measure the other one, 15, and then down. We're getting 15, and down, 15. So that balances that out. That may be a little bit too much elevator travel, but I don't think so. I think that's going to be good. And then if we go to full flaps, we still have our elevator travel available even with our sub trim in place. So now what I like to do is I like to visually check and make sure that these elevators are moving the way they should be. So all I do for that is much like we do with the flap. So I'm looking behind this aircraft right now, and I'm going to go forward, up elevator, and I'm just going to visually look across the flat part of the surface. And I'm comparing both of them. and making sure that they're traveling equally. And the other thing we can do, of course, is measure to make sure. So I'll take my measuring device. We're going to go like that. Center to center is 16. And center to center is 16. So that's basically perfectly matched right now. I think I'm going to drop the travel down on those elevator servos a little bit more, so I can hold the elevator servo in place like that and adjust it. So I'm going to drop it to 70 on both servos. 14 millimeters of travel, which is still good. I mean, like I said, we're wanting 10 to 15, so I think that's good. We'll leave that there. Good compromise. So our back end is essentially adjusted. Okay, with all of our surfaces done, now we are going to take a look at how we do our dual rate menu. So this is going to get a little bit technical, but I've already gone through and set this up, so it'll just be an overview here. So when we go to fine-tuning, dual rates, we'll take a look at the ailerons as an example. So essentially we've got 3 different flight mode positions. Okay, so it's not going to show anything, but they are separate. So as an example, if we were on takeoff flaps and we went to 82% and we go to regular flying, you'll see 65, 82, 65. But initially we're going to have everything set so it is equal. Then we also have our gyro on-off switch. So right now it doesn't matter what mode we're in, our rates and expo are the same. Now if we turn our gyro off in any of those rates or flight modes, you'll see the X show up and our expo goes up by 10%. Our rate stays the same, but our expo goes up by 10%. And that carries across all of the flight modes. So reason for that, we don't use rates on planes like this. There's no high rates, low rates. It's essentially the same rate. Now we do have different flight modes. Now you may find that like on landing flight mode as an example, you want a little bit more aileron throw, which is what we adjust. But I don't fly with rates. We don't have a high and low rate switch. The reason you want your gyro to be 10% higher on the expo is gyros naturally add expo. So when you turn your gyro off, if you don't have a differential in expo there, so creating more expo, it's going to feel way more sensitive with your gyro off than it is with the gyro on. So the goal there is to have a more even feel with gyro off, gyro on. So what I've done is gone through and basically created that setup with aileron, elevator, and rudder dual rates. So everything is equal, gyro on and gyro off are all equal. Now that will be adjusted on the first flight. So you take this plane up just like my BDX and you fly it around and you say, okay, feels a little bit soft. I want to take some of that expo out. The only thing to remember is you've got essentially 6 different flight modes to take that expo out of. So you have flight mode 1, 2, 3, then you have gyro on and gyro off version of those flight modes. That's very important. All right, so with our dual rates and everything all set up and ready to go, it's time to program the turbine. So pretty straightforward. We're going to go in here and we're going to go into radio, adjust radio, yes. So stick up, trim up. So we'll go to our main menu. We've got our trim on our 2-position switch. So 1, 2. So it goes from -100 to +100. So trim up, stick up. And we'll hit the OK button. Stick down, trim down. Stick down, trim down. OK. Stick down, trim up. Stick down, trim up. And OK. Perfect. So our turbine is now programmed with our radio. So we will turn that off and we'll make our other adjustments here. So we're going to go into our module, we'll go back to radio adjust, we'll hit no, and we want to make sure that we have half expo thrust curve, which we do. Restart mode, auto, there we go. So we're also going to go into our run menu and we are going to check this stuff, ambient accel auto, decel auto. Fuel capacity, I've already adjusted this, but it's at 6,000 milliliters because that's what the stock standard Elite Aerosports tank is, and that is all set. Fuel calibration, I did add a little bit of fuel calibration on my BDX, but every setup's different, so we'll leave that as is. So turbine is all programmed. Now we'll go in and we will do our landing gear. So start from the beginning. We'll go setup, radio, RC set. So set the transmitter in the gear up position and touch the next button. So gear up, and you'll see the number change here. So it went from 2000 to 1000. Hit next, set transmitter in gear down position. Gear down. And touch the next button. Perfect. Set brake channel to minimum. No brakes. Set brake channel to maximum. And next. There we go. So that's all saved. Now, from experience, if we have these brakes on right now, way too much brakes. So I'll show you guys what we change as a normal, just because I know exactly what we need to change. So we'll go brake. We're going to go pulse ratio. We'll go 1 to 4. So pulse ratio is kind of like ABS brakes. So that is a good amount of force and a nice amount of pulsing. Go to 50%. Check that. And drop that down to pulse ratio of 1:2. Now that's quite a bit of force. So I'm just going to go pulse ratio of 1:3. Now you can also go in there and adjust your limit. Now we don't use that controller for our nose steering gyro. We don't use brake gyro. So really nothing else is used here. You can also go to limit, and you can limit the max brakes as well. So right now our brakes are maxed, and they feel pretty good. I don't think there's a reason. Maybe we want to go in and drop that a little bit. The thing you're trying to avoid is flat spotting those wheels, right? So I'm going to go in and reduce this a little bit to 90%. There we go. So now we're 90% less. That feels better. And we'll go back into our brake menu, drop the pulse ratio to 1:2. See how that feels. That's good. So a little bit of anti-lock braking and a good amount of force. So now brakes are set up. Now if we do our gear check, we should have gear go up. Beautiful. That's good. Also our mix in the radio, we should have no nose steering right now, which is correct. And then if we go down, and now our nose steering should be on. Backwards, so it's reversed. So we need to change that nose steering servo. So we'll go in here into the radio. So model, servo setup, nose wheel, reverse, yes. And now right steering works, rudder, right rudder works. We're going to go right aileron, that's correct. Left aileron is correct. Up elevator is correct. And of course down elevator is correct. Okay, we're going to check the position of our nose wheel now. So right now it's off to the side just a little bit. So we're already in our nose wheel steering. So I'm going to just sub-trim this out in our servo menu. Perfect. So there we go. We're nice and centered. So that's a lot of detail. Hopefully you guys enjoyed all that detail. Essentially the programming on this aircraft is basically complete. The only other thing we need to do now is we need to adjust our gyro one more time. So if you remember, we've got our Cortex plug here, and that's because we've got our hush box. That's all going to be covered. So we're going to turn the power off. We're going to put our bind plug in there, and we're going to reprogram this gyro one more time. Now the reason for this is we have added different sub trims, we reversed the nose, so all of that needs to be done and dealt with to make sure that the gyro and the plane knows what's going on. So we'll power things down. Bind plug in the Cortex port. And this time you'll see what actually happens because our surfaces are going to bump. So we'll turn our radio back on. And gyro is going to go into programming mode. Double bump, green light, right aileron. Left aileron. Forward elevator. Back elevator. Right rudder. Left rudder. And gyro on or off. There you go. So the surfaces all bump and our gyro is flashing crazy green. So now we can take our plug out, power down the system. Perfect. Now when we turn the system back on, we're watching our gyro, red lights, white lights, double bump. Always looking for the double bump. Now everything is good. We can confirm that by moving our plane. So we move the nose and it steers the correct direction. Take our aileron surface, move it up, and it moves with our movement, so it moves up. Rudder moves the direction that we move the plane, and elevators move the direction that we move the plane. So right now, all of our surfaces are set up. Now, last thing I'll do here is I'm going to go into our gyro menu. So that is fine tuning, gyro settings, and you'll see here our gain changes. So regular flying, we're at 55%. I'm going to change that to be 50%. Takeoff flaps, 65%. Landing, 75%. That locks in the airplane on flap modes. And the other thing is when we turn our gyro on off, in all positions, it overrides it and turns it on and off. All right, so now that we've confirmed that we're happy with everything, everything's working like it should, it is goop time. So this is one of those things that I do that lots of people have been catching on to. It's just a great way to finish things off. So I like to go through and goop all my connectors on an aircraft. So every connector that goes in that's not locking, we want to goop those things. So I'll show you guys in more detail what I do. All I'm doing is taking a little bit of goop and just putting it on the edge of the servo connector. So that just ties in the servo connector into like the central box as an example. The goop is not permanent. It's easy to peel off later on, but it just prevents those servo connectors from coming undone when you don't want them to. All of our connectors in the front end are gooped. Time to install our plate and get our plumbing done. So we're going to get that screwed down first. First thing to do with the plumbing, actually before we do that, we need to run our line from our fuel pump. We haven't put our 4mm line on yet, so we'll put that on, run that towards the back of the turbine, and we also need to wire tie, safety wire those guys as well. All right, we're getting ready to test run our engine. Now we haven't done our CG yet, so we've got batteries in the nose, one of the blue balls in the front there just to make it more nose heavy. And tank is, it's about maybe 2/3 full, something like that. So anyways, what we're gonna do is we are going to turn the system on. We are going to prime our fuel pump first. So the fuel pump's not primed. The output side of the UAT, intake side of the pump is still blank. So we'll do that first, and then we will fire up this engine and confirm that she pushes sufficiently. All right, so we've got everything ready to run the turbine. We've got our fire extinguisher, our blower, our ear protection, our radio, and we have primed the pump going to the turbine. So we're going to do our standard setup test run. This engine has not been run yet, so we'll let the idle stabilize once it's started. We will do a slow acceleration over about 20 seconds to max throttle. We'll let the max throttle stabilize, and then we will do some acceleration checks. We'll do a restart test and confirm that we're happy with how this engine runs. So let's fire this thing up. All right, so engine run went well, no issues at all, tons of power. One cool thing about the Zykoy engines is if you go to the data screen, there's a certain screen where it actually shows you the reduction due to elevation and the amount of power you'll actually get from this engine. So it is kind of interesting to have that information available, and it's always adjusting based on atmospheric conditions. So, but otherwise the engine ran great, no issues at all. Next thing and final thing we have to do is our CG. So we're going to get that set up on this aircraft. I'm not going to share those details with you because it's very simple. We are going to use our RC CG machine to get that done. Great machine, love it. I've featured it in so many videos, but basically the CG on this aircraft, same as the BDX, is the back of the wing tube, which makes for a great flying plane. And with my BDX, I did 0 adjustments. So based on this, and I think the weight in the nose, I think we're going to be very close. But I do have the blue ball in here, but we don't have a canopy on. So we will probably have to put a couple strips of weight in the nose, but otherwise with this battery setup all the way in the nose, I think we're going to be good. And that, my friends, wraps up the Elite Aerosports RAYZR assembly build series. Wrapped this guy up in 3 videos. what a beautiful plane. Some planes really stick out as far as quality goes, and so far I have been extremely impressed with Elite Aerosports aircraft. The quality is just outstanding. Flying my own BDX is an absolute joy. So this aircraft, I've seen it fly, not this one personally, but I've seen the RAYZR fly. It's stunning. We will get the opportunity to do the flight videos of the maiden flight for this aircraft as well too, down in LA. So that's coming up soon as well. If you're thinking about an Elite Aerosports RAYZR, you will be happy for sure. So if you guys have any questions or comments, list them down below. You can also reach out to me by email, thelightersideofrc@gmail.com. And last thing, thumbs up to channel members. Thank you, channel members, for being a member of the channel. If you're not a channel member and you're hearing this, what channel membership is, it gives you early access to videos. So generally, channel members, they've got access to 2 to 4 videos before they're actually released to everybody. So thank you, channel members, for your support. Thanks, guys, for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.